In this video, we're going to take a look at factoring a more complicated expression and solving for the variable x. Now keep in mind when factoring, we should gather all terms on one side of the equal sign and gather all like terms. Then try to think about any common factors that can be factored out of the expression, as well as the rules for factoring a polynomial or a trinomial in this case. So go ahead and pause the video, try to factor this expression here. So here you'll notice that we have terms on either side of the equal sign. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is rewrite this expression where all terms are on the left-hand side of the equal sign and in decreasing powers of x. So I'm going to bring the 4x squared over to the left-hand side. It becomes negative. I'm going to bring the 24x over to the left-hand side, which also becomes negative. And we're going to set this equal to 0. Now on the left-hand side here, you can see that we have like terms of x squared. So I'm going to gather those like terms before we start factoring. So 3x cubed plus 6x squared minus 24x equals 0. Now notice that 3x cubed, 6x squared, and 24x are all multiples of 3, as well as they're all multiples of x. So we can factor out a 3x out of every single term. So what we would be left with is x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now here, 3x is considered to be the greatest common factor. So we're actually not done factoring this expression. Here, the trinomial can be factored even further. Now to factor this trinomial, we need to think of two numbers that are going to multiply to give us the value of -8, but also those two numbers need to add or subtract to give me the value of +2. Now those two numbers here would be 4 and -2. 4 and -2, when multiplied together, gives us -8. Also, 4 and -2, when we add them, this gives us +2. So 4 and -2 seem to work here. So to write this, we're going to change 2x to be 4x minus 2x, because this here is equivalent to the 2x up above. So we haven't done anything wrong. We haven't really changed the question. We're going to subtract the 8 still and keep this equal to 0. Now what we're going to do is gather these two terms and gather these two terms. So in the next line we have 3x multiplied by x squared plus 4x plus -2x minus 8. Now notice here that x is a common factor, and notice here that -2 is a common factor. So in our next step, we're going to common factor an x out of the first bracket, and we're going to common factor a -2 out of the second bracket. Now notice here within the square bracket, x plus 4 is common, so we can common factor an x plus 4 out. So we will have 3x multiplied by an x plus 4 multiplied by an x minus 2. Set this equal to 0, and now we're almost done. So in order to solve for x, what we would do is take each factor and set them equal to 0 in order to solve for x. So in this case, we would have 3x equals 0, we would have x plus 4 equals 0, or we would have x minus 2 equals 0. So in the first case here, when 3x is equal to 0 and we solve for x, x would equal 0. In the second one here, when x plus 4 equals 0, then x would just simply equal -4. And in the last case here, when x minus 2 equals 0, x would equal positive 2. So those three values of x are all possible solutions of this equation. So in other words, to make the left-hand side of the equation equal the right-hand side of the equation, the values of x that would make that happen are x equals 0, or x equals -4, or x equals 2. Now an easier method to factor a trinomial in this bracket here would be this. Think of two numbers that are going to multiply to give us -8, but also those two numbers should add or subtract to give us positive 2. Now we discovered that those two numbers were 4 and -2. So if you know those two numbers would be 4 and -2, then you can simply go right from this step here that I'm circling right to this step here that I'm circling. Basically, we would do x plus 4, because it's a positive 4, multiplied by x minus 2, because it's a -2. And that would give me my factored version of the trinomial. Another method that can be used to factor this trinomial could be the quadratic equation as well.